So December 23rd, 2004, a man got off a bus here. Michael Egan, 41, shot to death by Vincent Stemley Jr. Stemley got off the bus, Egan slapped him in the face, knocking off his glasses, and Stemley pulled out a gun and shot Egan and then surrendered to the police. But first, I will tell you about what happened here in September 14th, 1969. A woman named Glenda Hornsby, her real name was Rosalie Laverne Hornsby, she went by Glenda, and she was in a hotel up the street on Southeast 12th Avenue with a guy. And the man that she was living with in this hotel found her in the room with the guy, beat her severely, and picked her up and carried her out of the hotel, threw her in his car, drove her down here. As he was leaving, several people saw her and saw that she was badly injured, and he said, "Don't worry about it, she's my wife." They ignored him. Brought her back to his hotel here. She lay on the bed for hours. He actually, at one point, about midnight, called the night clerk to come up and take a look at her. And he came up and looked at her, and he could see that she was badly injured, possibly dying. He didn't do anything. He went back to his work. A couple of hours later, John Peterson, the guy, left the hotel, and another resident saw the door open to the room, peeked his head in, and found her dead on the bed. So the blood was just spattered everywhere. July 18th, 1969, a man from Oakland was staying in room 402 in this building. He had a bad dream about a group of terrorists trying to kill him, so he pulled out his gun, opened the door, fired 6 shots down the hall, and went back to bed. Didn't hit anybody though. When I first found this hotel, I stayed here. I just was moving to Portland, took a room here. It was on this side. I remember I was right near the fire escape. It was a very frightening room. It was dirty. I opened the closet to hang my clothes up, and I had the feeling of someone curled up on the floor of the closet, and I could not open that closet anymore. I laid down on the bed, and I had the same kind of a feeling. So I slept that night in an armchair by the window, and I couldn't come back the next night. And that's what got me looking at crimes in Portland. I wanted to see what had happened here, and I think that I was in the same room that Rosalie Hornsby died in that night. That's what I figured out since then. This is the house where Sharon Ryan was staying with her sister in 1976, right before Christmas when she was murdered. She decided to walk to the Thriftway store because she needed some extra ingredients for cookies. Sharon Ryan was a high school senior. She was 17 years old. She was a competitive dancer. Her body was found in a clump of grass that used to be over here. She'd been missing for 2 days after she'd walked to the Thriftway store. A few days later, the police became suspicious of one of the guys that was cooperating with the investigation. He was a little bit too interested, so they started looking at him as a suspect. They arrested him where he worked, which was Sam's Hollywood Billiards. It's down this direction a couple of miles. Well, I'm J.D. Chandler. I've been reading and writing about crime here in Portland for about almost 20 years. I've been reading the Oregonian. Again, the Oregonian is the main source of my murder stories. I became kind of obsessed with murders in the 90s because my friend James Lee, a taxi driver up in Seattle, was killed. And then when I came to Portland, I told the story about the Alder Hotel. That kind of stimulated my interest in the murder stories, and I started collecting them. I used to haunt the downtown library every Sunday, and I would read the microfilms. I also write novels about crime and sometimes not about crime. I have Mud Bay is available in an ebook edition, and Crime Family short stories is also available in an ebook edition. Oh, this is my handwritten index of the file drawers by chronology murder dates, and I've been working on transcribing it into an Excel file so I can use it better. So far I've got 675 of them into the Excel spreadsheet. So across the street there, it's called the East Bank Saloon and Restaurant now. In 1948, it was the Oregon Cafe. And on April 21st, 1948, a man named Frank Lester was stabbed to death. Lester was a local. He lived right just around the corner, a couple of blocks up Morrison, in an apartment. And he was stabbed by a guy named Edward Lewis, whose wife worked in the restaurant. And Lewis had come in and sat down at a table, and Lester was sitting in a booth nearby. And for some reason, the two men didn't like each other from the start, and they traded insults more than once. Lewis claimed that the reason that he killed Lester was because he had used profanity to his wife. One of the drivers here in the 90s was a serial killer. In 1946, the Bowdens, James and Fern Bowden, lived here with their 2 teenage daughters. And James Bowden was gone for most of World War II. He was working on construction projects up in Alaska. And his wife took a job at the Port of Portland and became friends with the man that she worked with. When James, or he went by Wes, when Wes Bowden came back to Portland, he was very jealous of his wife working and of the guy that she knew from work. And he also may have had a little bit of post-traumatic stress from the war because he was a little nuts. And he built a bomb in his footlocker in the basement. And he went on a fishing trip to Newport where he was building a ship with his brother. And he made a big fuss out of it. He was working on the footlocker wearing gloves, and his daughters saw that and it made them very suspicious. And he told his daughters and his wife, stay away from the basement, don't open the footlocker. And then he went to Newport, and it made them really curious. They wanted to know what was in the footlocker. And Fern was worried that he was plotting something. So when the girls were gone, she went down to the basement, opened the footlocker, and a bomb tore the whole front off of the house and killed her. Her husband was arrested a few days later in Newport, and he claimed that it was an accident. He claimed that he'd built the bomb to kill the guy that he thought his wife was having an affair with, but then didn't have the nerve to go through with it, and that his wife died in an accident. He was convicted and sentenced to life.
And the previous owner, who's a friend of mine, told me the story many years ago because I had walked in the basement and there was a swastika painted down there, and I thought, well, why is that there? Because this person clearly wasn't at all of that persuasion. But he just hadn't thought about it really, and then that sort of led to the story of how the previous owner apparently had rigged a trunk. I forget, there was it was in the paper at the time, and I guess he rigged the trunk so when his wife opened it, it exploded and of course killed her. Yeah. Like I said, the way I kind of viewed it was, well, I guess nothing that bad will ever happen here again. You know, so it's really kind of optimistic bent on the situation, you know.
Right.
So that's how I view it, you know. I mean, the likelihood that somebody else would get murdered here would be astronomical.
Now there's an ending for your video.